She bit the rancher when he tried to inspect her teeth. He just laughed. She'd been caught like a wild thing in a trap, but he hadn't bought her for obedience. He bought her to tame his daughter. Neither girl knew they'd end up saving each other's life. The auctioneer hadn't even finished his call before the man raised his hand. A flick of 2 fingers, barely more than a nod, and the bid was his. The girl on the platform twisted against the ropes binding her wrists, hair wild, face smeared with dust, and eyes so sharp they could have cut through fence wire. She didn't cry, didn't beg, just spat at the ground and snarled something too low to hear. The man who'd claimed her didn't flinch. He was tall, gray at the temples, with shoulders too broad for the fine jacket he wore. His name was Silas Hargreaves, and folks in Grafton called him the richest man this side of the divide. They also called him cold, practical, and dangerous when crossed. But no one called him a fool. He paid in gold, not paper, and when the girl snapped at him as he tried to help her down from the block, he chuckled, not out of amusement, but interest, like he'd found a broken tool that might still do its job with a little oil and time. She didn't tell him her name, so he didn't ask. He loaded her into the back of a wagon and handed her a canteen. "You drink or you die," he said plainly. She drank. The road back to Hargreaves' ranch was long and hot, winding through dry hills and dust-thick canyons. He didn't speak, and neither did she. The only sound came from the wheels creaking and the horses snorting under the sun. Every so often, Silas would glance back, just once, as if to check she hadn't leapt off and bolted. But she didn't. Whether it was the rope tied from her ankle to the wagon rail or the strange curiosity in her eyes, she stayed put. When the ranch house finally appeared, 3 stories tall and shaded by ancient oaks, it felt like another country. White-painted walls, tall windows, trimmed hedges. Not a trace of wild in sight. Servants stepped back when Silas entered, and they stared when they saw the girl trailing behind him, barefoot and sun-bitten. Inside, the girl's breath caught. Not from beauty, she didn't care about velvet chairs or polished floors, but from the shock of being somewhere that clean, that still. Her instinct said to knock something over just to hear a crash. "This," Silas said, voice cutting into the silence, "is your new home. For now." She didn't answer. He turned to a woman standing stiff in the doorway. "May, get her something to eat, in a room she can't climb out of." Then, to the girl, "Tomorrow, you meet Annabelle." Annabelle Hargreaves was halfway through throwing a silver hairbrush at her maid when her father knocked once and entered. She was 16, furious, and already furious that she wasn't allowed to finish yelling. "Papa," I said I didn't want, but she stopped when she saw the girl behind him, the wild one. She blinked. "What is that?" "That," Silas said calmly, "is your new teacher." Annabelle's mouth dropped. "You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious." "You brought a savage into my room." Silas raised one hand. The room fell silent. "You've grown up with everything, and you've learned nothing. That ends now. She will teach you how to work, how to live without silver spoons and silk slippers. You will teach her how not to bite people." "I don't want to," Annabelle said stubbornly. "I didn't ask," Silas replied. He left before she could argue. The girl stood in the doorway, face blank. She didn't smile, didn't sneer, just stared like she was measuring how long it would take to snap Annabelle's wrist if she tried anything. Annabelle narrowed her eyes. "Do you have a name?" The girl shrugged. "I'm not calling you girl." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Call me June." "June," Annabelle repeated like it tasted strange. "You smell like horses." June grinned, the first true expression she'd shown. "You smell like lies." From that moment on, the war began. The next morning, Silas found Annabelle in the stables, trying to carry a saddle twice her size. She dropped at the moment she saw him. "This is ridiculous. I could get hurt." "Good," Silas muttered, then turned to June, who was already mucking stalls without complaint. June didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. Her presence alone unsettled the order of the ranch. Servants whispered when she passed. Annabelle's friends stopped visiting. One even burst into tears when June glared at her across the parlor. The girl had grown up fighting snakes and cold nights, and it showed in every sharp angle of her stare. She didn't try to fit in. She didn't try at all. Annabelle, meanwhile, tried everything to make her father change his mind. She cried. She pouted. She locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Silas didn't budge. "You'll learn faster," he told her, "when you have to." So she did, grudgingly at first, then with teeth bared. She followed June out to the barns, learned to saddle her own horse, braid rope, clean her own messes. She learned how to ride, not side saddle, but hard and fast like the ranch hands did. June taught her without speaking much, just a nod here, a shake of the head there. But slowly, Annabelle began to get it. Not just the work, but the rhythm of something real, something unpolished. The dirt under her nails no longer made her shudder. The sun on her face no longer felt like punishment. In June started to soften. She didn't smile much, but she didn't glare all the time either. One evening, Annabelle found her crouched beside a barn cat, feeding it scraps from her hand. June looked up, startled, and shoved the food away. "You'll make it weak," she muttered. Annabelle sat beside her. "Maybe it's just hungry." They didn't speak after that, but they didn't move either, just sat in silence as the stars rose. One night, while the house slept, June awoke in a sweat. Her dreams were filled with fire and screaming, and a man's hand grabbing her wrist too hard. She sat bolt upright in the cot, chest heaving. In the hallway, a light flicked on. Annabelle stepped out, her hair tangled from sleep. "You okay?" June didn't answer. "Want to sit on the porch?" Annabelle asked. Again, silence. But June followed her anyway. They sat without speaking, listening to crickets and the creak of the windmill. June spoke first. "I don't remember my mother's face." Annabelle blinked. "What?" "She died in a fire. My pa tried to go back in. Neither came out." Annabelle didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "I grew up in a mining camp after that," June continued, voice low. "Then got traded, sold, stolen. I don't remember half the places. I just ran when I could." Annabelle stared at her. "And now you're here, with me." June smirked. "Life's funny." Annabelle smiled. "Yeah, real funny." They didn't notice the shadow moving near the barn. Didn't see the figure step out from behind the trough, or the way he checked a worn piece of paper against the moonlight. It had June's name on it. They heard the horses before they saw the men. A low rustle in the dark, the metallic jingle of reins, and the soft crunch of hooves in dry grass. June tensed so hard the porch slats creaked beneath her, her hand already on the rusted spade leaning against the step. Annabelle squinted toward the tree line, brows pulling tight. "Probably just a night patrol," she whispered. But June shook her head, sharp and certain. "Too quiet. Patrol don't move like that." Then she stood, not fast, not loud, but with the same kind of motion a deer makes just before bolting for its life. Silas came out onto the porch with his shotgun cradled across his arms, his mouth drawn into a line as thin and grim as the moon above them. He didn't ask questions, just looked at June and said, "How many?" Her voice was flat. "3, maybe 4. One at a paper. My name's on it." Silas didn't blink. He turned toward the dark and called, "You're on private land. State your business." No answer. Just the soft nicker of a nervous horse. Then a voice came from the dark, smooth as melted tar. "We've come for what's ours. Ain't no business but collecting." Annabelle's face drained of color. She looked at June, who'd gone still again. Not scared, not even angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that means something terrible is getting ready to wake up. "How do they find you?" Annabelle asked in a breath. "I don't know," June said, but her eyes didn't leave the trees. "But they won't leave empty-handed. Not unless we stop them." Silas stepped forward. "You got no rights here. No warrants. No law." The voice in the dark chuckled. "That girl was bought. Paperwork says she belongs to Elias Merton. You took her out of auction with no release. You're a thief, Hargreaves, and she's a runaway." Silence pressed heavy. Then Silas said, cool and deliberate, "I don't give a damn what your paper says. She's a child, and I don't hand over children to wolves." A rifle cracked. The porch post beside Silas exploded in a burst of splinters. Annabelle screamed and dropped, covering her head. June didn't move. Her eyes were already searching, finding the weakest spots in the dark, the nearest cover, the easiest path to flank. Silas dropped low, motioning them inside. Now he snapped. Go! Inside the house, chaos broke loose. Servants rushed to shutter windows, douse lamps, and pull children into basements. Annabelle's legs trembled beneath her, but she followed June, heart pounding like it might break clean through her ribs. What do we do? She gasped. Hide? Lock the doors. June turned to her, fierce and unflinching. Doors won't hold men like that. We don't hide. We outlast. From the window, she spotted them. 3 riders moving low and slow, rifles slung across their backs, wide-brimmed hats shadowing their faces. But it was the 4th that made her blood run cold. A smaller man, stocky, with a mangled left hand. His name was Jonas Pike, and once, years ago, he'd been the one who'd tied a chain around her ankle and told her she'd better learn quick or die trying. She thought she'd left him burning in a fire she barely escaped. Clearly not. Silas returned with ammunition and a plan. We hold a house. They can't come in without exposing themselves. They're not stupid, they'll wait us out, which means we have to last until sunup. June nodded. And then? Silas looked at her. Then I'll deal with Merton's men. Annabelle sat against the wall, arms wrapped tight around her knees. They're here for you, she said to June, her voice shaking. Because someone thinks they own you. That's not right. June sat beside her, fingers twitching with restrained fury. I've been sold before, she said quietly. But never again. They want to take me. They'll have to bleed for it. The night stretched on. Shots rang out every half hour. Testing them. Tiring them. One bullet shattered the parlor's mirror. Another whistled through the kitchen door. But no one got in. Silas kept the defense tight, moving from window to window like a man who'd fought wars before. June helped where she could, quiet, precise, always watching. Annabelle stayed low, but her eyes never left June's. Not once. Around 3 in the morning, the wind picked up and scattered ash into the air. June froze at the smell. Smoke. Not gunpowder. Fire. They're burning the barn, she said hoarsely, already rising to her feet. The horses, they're a distraction, Silas warned, grabbing her arm. They want to draw you out. June hesitated. Then Annabelle whispered, please don't go. They'll kill you. But June was already running. Outside, the barn was ablaze. Horses shrieked inside, hooves slamming against stalled doors. June didn't slow. She burst through the side door, smoke curling around her like snakes, flames licking up the beams. She shoved open stall doors, one after the other, smacking flanks, screaming hoarsely for the animals to run. A burning beam cracked and dropped behind her, searing her shoulder. She stumbled, but didn't stop. Just kept moving, her lungs filling with smoke, eyes watering, skin blistering. She got the last mare free before the roof started to go. She threw herself out a side window, just as the back half collapsed. Silas and 2 ranch hands pulled her clear, coughing, dragging her through the dirt. Her shirt was scorched, her arms bleeding. But she lived. Annabelle met her at the porch steps, eyes wide, mouth trembling. You could have died. June just nodded. So could they. They sat together again, side by side, as Silas doused the wounds and muttered about stubborn girls and near suicides. By dawn, the gunfire stopped, but the riders didn't leave. They stayed just out of sight, just out of reach, like jackals circling a dying calf. Silas gathered his coat and saddle. I'm going to talk to them. June grabbed his arm. Don't. They'll shoot you. He looked down at her with something almost like fondness. They won't. Merton's men know better than to kill a Hargreaves without orders. They'll want leverage. I'll give them none. He rode out slowly, white flag tied to his whip. June watched every step. Annabelle gripped her hand without realizing it, her fingers ice cold. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. When Silas returned, his expression was grave. They're not leaving, he said, dismounting. They've been told not to come home without the girl. Annabelle stepped forward. Then we won't let them. Silas gave her a long look. That might mean people die. I don't care, she said, her voice breaking. She's not theirs. But June just stared at the horizon. He's coming, she murmured. Who? Silas asked. Elias Merton, she said, her tone empty. He always finishes what he starts. The next morning, he arrived. A black carriage pulled by 4 black horses. He wore no guns, just a long coat and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. His men flanked him. The air around the ranch turned thick, waiting for a spark. June didn't speak when she saw him. She just stepped onto the porch and stood tall. Elias removed his gloves slowly, one finger at a time. You've grown, wild girl, he said. I'm impressed. Silas crossed his arms. You'll leave now. She's under my protection. Elias smiled wider. I don't think you understand. I have receipts, claims, ledgers. She was bought and paid for. Then to June, come back now, and I'll forget this little tantrum. I might even forgive the fire. June's jaw clenched. You can't forgive what you caused. Girl, he said, dangerously soft, you belong to me. No, June said, voice clear and sharp. I belong to no one. Then she drew Silas's spare revolver and pointed it straight at him. Everyone froze. Elias's eyes gleamed. Go ahead, he said. Shoot me. See how long your friends last after that. Silas stepped beside her. You won't touch her. And what army stops me? Annabelle stepped out from the house. Me. Then May. Then the ranch hands. One by one, the people of the ranch stepped forward, armed or unarmed, lined up beside Silas and June. No army, no badges. Just a wall of ordinary people who decided that girl wasn't going to be taken again. Elias stared, and then he laughed. He laughed like it was a game, like the scorched barn, the bleeding girl, the trembling daughter beside her were all some twisted spectacle he had paid good money to watch. Elias Merton straightened his cuffs with the same slow arrogance he used to toss coins to his underlings. You think this end with a standoff? He said, smiling through his teeth. You think a girl like her gets to choose? His eyes cut to June, cold and calculating. You were bought, and the world don't care what wild things feel. It only cares who owns them. June didn't move, didn't blink, but something inside her slipped. Not fear. No. Fear she'd long since buried, but clarity. Like every broken night, every scar, every hunger she'd swallowed, suddenly lined up into one perfect thought. Elias was right about one thing. The world didn't care what wild things felt. But people could, and she could. And for the first time, she wasn't the one standing alone. Annabelle stepped forward again, head high despite the tremble in her chin. You're not taking her, she said firmly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Elias raised a brow, amused. Is that right, princess? You ready to die for her? Before she could answer, Silas placed himself directly between Elias and the girls. You've got 5 seconds to ride out before I decide this land's worth the mess of burying you. There was a pause, long tense. Then Elias flicked his hand. 2 of his men raised rifles. The sound of hammers being drawn back echoed like thunder across the yard. But it wasn't from Elias's men. It was from the dozen ranch hands now lined shoulder to shoulder along the porch and rooftops. Old men, young boys, cooks, stable hands, servants. All of them held weapons. Some rusted, some gleaming. All steady. Elias's face twitched. The smile faltered, if only for a second. Then he lowered his hand. You've made your choice, he said, voice turning bitter. And I'll make mine. He turned on his heel and walked back to the black carriage. The door slammed. The wheels churned. The horses whinnied in protest. And just like that, he was gone, at least for now. The relief didn't come immediately. Even after the dust settled, even after the figures vanished into the trees, no one moved. Like if they breathed too loudly, the whole thing might come rushing back. It was Silas who finally spoke. We'll need to be ready. That wasn't retreat. That was delay. June lowered the pistol slowly. Her hand shook now, not from fear, from restraint, from the weight of choosing not to fire. Annabelle reached for her, and this time June didn't pull away. They all slept in the great hall that night, not because it was safest, but because it felt right. June refused a bed, curling in front of the hearth like she had in camps and barns her whole life. Annabelle lay nearby, half watching her in the firelight. "He'll come back," Annabelle whispered. "He doesn't let things go." June didn't look at her. "Then we finish it," she said. The following morning brought silence too deep to trust. No birds, no wind, just that stretching hush that comes before a storm. Silas and May called a meeting. Ranch hands, cooks, stable boys, everyone. "Elias won't be satisfied," Silas told them. "He'll come back with more men. Real guns. Maybe even law on his side." There were murmurs. Faces pale. But no one left. No one packed. And that was answer enough. June, who had stood near the door, arms crossed and distant, finally spoke. "We can't wait. We hit first. Disrupt them. Make it costly." Eyes turned toward her. "You mean attack?" someone asked. June nodded. "Strike before they're ready. I know where he keeps his people." A camp about 12 miles north, hidden in the canyon near Widow's Peak. "How would you know that?" Silas asked, frowning. "Because I've escaped it twice," she said flatly. "It's not guarded well at night. He doesn't think people like me fight back. He thinks we run." She glanced at Annabelle. "He's wrong. They spent the day preparing. Not in open panic, but with purpose." June sketched maps in the dirt with a stick, showing paths, watch posts, how to sneak in under cover of night. Silas listened, nodded, asked questions. It was the first time anyone had looked at her like a leader. Not a burden, not a purchase, but someone with value beyond survival. Annabelle followed her everywhere. She watched how June moved through the barn, checking saddles and reins. Watched how she fed the animals without flinching at their size. She even tried lifting a rifle, though it nearly dropped from her arms. "You'll need smaller hands for now," June said gently, swapping it for a lighter pistol. "But don't flinch. You pull, you mean it." By nightfall, a small group was ready. Silas, 2 seasoned ranch hands, June, and, unexpectedly, Annabelle. Silas nearly refused her. "This isn't some lesson, Belle. This is blood and war." But she stood her ground. "I'm not learning anything sitting back while others fight. I'm going." He didn't argue again. They rode out under a sliver of moonlight, moving like shadows down old cattle trails. The path was rough, and Annabelle had never ridden so hard. But she didn't complain. June led them with precision, slowing near each bend, checking for signs of tracks or movement. When they reached the ridge, they dismounted and crept forward on foot. From above, Widow's Peak was a wound in the earth, deep, narrow, with smoke curling lazily from half-covered fires. The camp was quiet. A few tents, 2 wagons, 6 men milling about. One was asleep. The others drank or played cards. Elias wasn't there, but they'd still make a dent. June laid out the plan quickly, efficiently. Silas would take the far tents, cutting off escape. Annabelle, in one hand, would move left, near the supply crates. June and the other would go straight down the center. It started with a thrown lantern. 1 second the camp was quiet. The next, fire erupted across the center crates. Shouts rang out. Guns were grabbed. June moved fast, ducking low, sliding behind barrels, disarming a man with a quick twist of the wrist and slamming the butt of a rifle into his temple. Annabelle fired once, missed, but it was enough to send 2 men diving for cover. Silas's group overpowered the rest before they could regroup. It was over in minutes. Breathing hard, June stood in the wreckage, hands bleeding, smoke rising around her like steam from a forge. She turned to find Annabelle kneeling beside a stunned ranch hand, her face pale but steady. "You did good," June said, helping her up. "I missed," Annabelle whispered. "But you shot," June answered. "That's more than most." They found papers in the tents. Lists, names, prices, June's included. Along with 2 other girls she remembered from a mine camps. Silas pocketed the documents grimly. "This'll help. Maybe even enough to get law on our side." Back at the ranch, dawn broke over charred soil and smoke-stained hands. No one slept. They waited, and the next evening, Elias returned. This time with lawmen. 3 of them. badges pinned to stiff jackets, spurs gleaming. One was federal, Silas noted from the patchwork of insignia on his coat. The others were local. Men who knew Silas by name, but who wouldn't meet his eyes. "This here's official," the federal marshal announced. "We've come to collect a fugitive. Girl named June. Stolen property. Illegal sale." He held up a document like it weighed 100 pounds. "We don't want no trouble." Silas stepped forward. "And if I say you've got it wrong, then we bring you in too." The line of ranch hands appeared again, rifles at the ready. June stepped out from behind the porch rail. She looked directly at the marshal. "I want to speak," she said. The man looked surprised. "Speak. I want to testify. I have documents, witnesses, evidence of trafficking, forced labor, abuse. You want a trial, Marshal? You'll get one. But not for me, for him." She pointed past the men toward the road. "Elias Merton." The marshal blinked. "You got proof?" June nodded. "Enough to bury him." He hesitated, looked at Silas, at the rifles, at June's burned arm and blistered hand. Then finally, slowly, he lowered the document. "Then I suggest," he said quietly, "we start talking." But Elias wasn't done. From the woods behind the marshal's men came a single gunshot. One of the local lawmen dropped. Chaos erupted. Elias's men had hidden in the trees. It had been a trap, and June was in the open. The shot came fast and sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. The local deputy dropped where he stood, the tin badge on his chest catching the sun as he fell back into the dust. A second shot cracked through the trees. Then a third. Screams erupted, some ducking for cover, others drawing their guns with trembling hands. But June didn't flinch. She was already moving, pushing Annabelle down behind a trough, shielding her with her body. Silas dove beside them, his revolver already raised, scanning the trees for flashes of light. It was Elias. He'd waited just out of sight, just past the lawman, hiding his real force until the tension stretched so thin that one bullet would unravel everything. And it had. Now the badge meant nothing. Now it was bullets again, and blood, and lines drawn with gunpowder instead of ink. "Get to the house," Silas barked, grabbing Annabelle by the wrist. "Take her. Go." June didn't argue. She dragged the girl to her feet and sprinted across the yard, hooves thundering behind them, glass shattering as more shots found windows, beams, fences. A ranch hand went down near the barn, clutching his leg, screaming for help. Another returned fire from the roof, only to be thrown back in a cloud of red and splinters. It was chaos, and it wasn't ending. June shoved Annabelle through the kitchen door and slammed it behind them. "Get low," she shouted, dragging the stove across the frame with a strength she didn't know she had. "Back pantry. Go." Annabelle stumbled into the darkness beyond the kitchen, gasping, her hands pressed to her ears as the sounds of war filled the house. June turned back to the window and saw Elias step from the woods, slow and smug, flanked by 3 men with shotguns. He walked like nothing could touch him, like every soul on this land was already buried and forgotten. Silas appeared at the edge of the porch, blood streaked across his sleeve. He aimed clean and true, fired once. One of Elias's men dropped, spinning hard into the dirt. A moment later, Silas vanished again, back into the smoke. June ducked as another window exploded above her. Dust rained down. Somewhere a door slammed. Then a scream, female, distant. June's blood went cold. Not Annabelle. Please, not her. She sprinted down the hallway, nearly slipping on a rug soaked in spilled oil. At the parlor, she found May, on the floor, bleeding from the scalp, eyes wide with terror. "They came through the cellar," she rasped. "One of them's in the west wing, looking for the girl." June knelt fast. "Where's Silas?" "Trapped. Gone." They said it again. Her voice cracked. "He won't make it without help." It was too much at once. The house breached. Silas in danger. Annabelle alone. June had seconds. She stood, turned left, toward the west wing. It was instinct. She didn't choose the girl over the man. She just moved, fast and silent, her bare feet barely touching the floor. Down the hallway, past portraits of ancestors who never knew what true danger looked like. toward the creaking sound of a door slowly opening. She saw the shadow first. A man, tall, lean, holding a blade, not a gun. The kind of man who liked pain slow and personal. He slipped into the guest room, steps cautious. June followed. Inside, Annabelle was cornered, crouched near the bed, a fireplace poker trembling in her hands. The man smiled. "Come on now, sweetheart. Just want to talk." He stepped forward. June grabbed the oil lamp from the hall, stepped through the door, and smashed it against his head. Fire bloomed instantly. He screamed, a high, keening sound, stumbling back into the curtains. The flames took hold fast. June grabbed Annabelle and dragged her out as smoke followed them into the corridor. "Go." June coughed. "Basement. There's a tunnel behind the grain sacks." "But Silas, I'll find him." "Go." They split at the stairs, Annabelle diving down into the darkness, June charging through the front parlor, past the bodies, the smoke, the broken glass. She didn't stop, didn't think, just ran. Outside, the barn was ablaze again. But this time it wasn't empty. Through the cracks, she saw movement. Silas, pinned behind a trough, shielding another wounded hand. Fire rolled across the roof, ready to collapse. June darted around the side, where the old chicken run opened into a rear wall. The latch was still broken. She slipped inside. "Silas," she hissed. He turned, eyes wide. "What the hell, come on." They ducked low, avoiding falling beams, stepping over a dead mule and burning straw. At the back wall, June kicked out the slats. They crawled through the dirt, smoke chasing them like ghosts. Outside, the sun was rising. And with it, the gunfire was slowing. Silas looked at her, bleeding and burned, and shook his head. "You're going to get yourself killed." June shrugged. "Better me than her." He grunted. "You sure don't act like a girl raised in the dirt." "That's 'cause I wasn't raised," she snapped. "I survived." They limped back toward the house, where Annabelle had reemerged with the rest of the staff. Many of them wounded, some shaking, all armed. The surprise had passed. Now it was just grit. Elias had regrouped near the main gate, rallying what men he had left. But the tide was turning, and he knew it. He mounted his horse slowly, surveying the ranch, burning buildings, bloodied men, and that girl. That girl standing straight and tall beside Silas Hargreaves. "You don't win this, Elias," Silas called out. "You just prolong it." Elias's voice was calm, but his smile had twisted into something sharp. "You can keep her. Today. But I'll own this land within a month. Every debt. Every deed. I'll choke you out until even the dirt won't want your name on it." June stepped forward. "Then you better start digging now, because we're still standing." He stared at her, and this time he didn't laugh. He just turned his horse and rode. Silence fell hard behind him. For a long time, no one spoke. Then they limped forward. "That can't be the end." Silas shook his head. "It's just the beginning." They buried 2 hands that evening, said their names, marked the earth, lit candles that flickered low into the night. In the house, June sat in the hallway, her back to the wall. Blood crusted her fingers. Her eyes were hollow, but she hadn't cried. Not once. Annabelle approached with a wet cloth and knelt beside her. She didn't speak, just pressed the cloth to June's temple. "I should have shot him," June said quietly. Annabelle looked at her. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." They sat like that a while, the fire crackling in a nearby hearth. Eventually, Annabelle said, "When this started, I thought I was supposed to teach you something." June glanced at her, the corner of her mouth twitching. "Guess that didn't work out." "No," Annabelle said. "It did. Just not the way I thought." Then she leaned against her, and June didn't pull away. That night, the house didn't sleep. They took shifts, posted watches, made food in silence. But even through the grief and tension, something shifted. When a sheriff arrived the next morning, he brought word from town. A federal agent had come forward, claiming forged documents. A raid on one of Merton's holding camps had uncovered more names. More girls. There would be trials. There would be charges. And June was being called to testify. Silas met her outside the barn. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "No one's making you." June looked down at her hands. Scarred, calloused, tired. "If I don't," she said, "he does it again. To someone else. Silas nodded. Then I'll ride with you. Annabelle joined them on the porch. So will I. You sure? June asked, eyes searching hers. Annabelle didn't flinch. I'd rather stand beside you in a courtroom than behind you at a grave. June blinked fast, then nodded. They left 3 days later. Not as rancher and purchase. Not as heiress and wild thing. But as girls who had both lost things they couldn't get back and were finally ready to fight for the things they could. They rode through a gray dawn, hooves muffled in the mist that clung low to the earth. Every fence post and pine shadow looked like it could hold a threat, and June watched them all with a stillness that made her seem more animal than girl. Annabelle rode beside her, wrapped in her father's old coat, the hem dragging over the stirrups. She hadn't said much since they'd left the ranch, not from fear, but because the silence between them no longer needed to be filled. Behind them, Silas followed with a slow, even gait, reins loose in one hand, rifle balanced across his saddle. He kept glancing between the girls, not because he doubted them, but because he didn't trust the world they were riding into. The town of Olston sat crouched at the base of the hills like a dog waiting to be kicked. Its buildings sagged, the streets slushed with half-melted snow and the filth of too many people packed too tight. But the courthouse stood tall, red-bricked and stubborn, its bell tower still gleaming from a polish that suggested someone in town still believed in law. They arrived without fanfare, without welcome. A marshal met them at the edge of the square, his mustache stiff with frost, his eyes wary. "You the girl?" he asked June without a trace of warmth. "She is," Silas answered before June could speak. The marshal nodded, motioned them forward. "You're to stay at the boarding house. Trial starts tomorrow. Be in the courtroom by 8. June dismounted without help, her spine rigid. "Where's Elias?" she asked. The marshal didn't blink. "Cell block. Been pacing since yesterday." He turned, and watching the clock like he thinks he can charm the hours backward. Inside the boarding house, everything smelled faintly of onions and coal. The landlady was a tight-faced woman who spoke only when she had to, showed them to 2 small adjoining rooms, and reminded them sharply that we don't take kindly to noise after dark. Annabelle stood at the window for a long time, watching the street below. "You ever been in a courtroom?" she asked softly. June shook her head. "Only rooms with bars." "Are you scared?" June didn't answer right away. Then, "I'm not sure I know how to be scared anymore." The night passed in pieces. Short bursts of sleep broken by footsteps, distant dogs, the occasional scream from somewhere in town. June kept her boots on, just in case. By morning, the sky was the color of ash, and the air carried a damp chill. They walked to the courthouse in silence. At the steps, they met the marshal again. "You speak clear, girl," he told June gruffly. "Say what you know. Let the rest fall where it may." She nodded, jaw tight. Inside, the room was packed. Townsfolk, ranchers, a few reporters with pens twitching eagerly. June kept her eyes ahead. On the bench sat the judge, an older man with a long face and tired eyes. He looked at June the way a man looks at the horizon before a storm. Elias was already seated at the defense table. He wore a crisp suit, clean-shaven, hair slicked back. If not for the bruising just beneath his collar, still yellow from the last fight, you'd think he was a banker, not a slaver. When June entered, he smiled. Not kindly, but with the casual cruelty of a man who believed she was still his. June stared him down without flinching. The proceedings began. Witnesses were called. Documents were read. Elias's attorney, a lean vulture of a man, objected often, loudly, but the judge allowed most of it. Then it was June's turn. She stepped into the box slowly, her boots echoing on the polished floor. When asked to state her name, she said it firmly. "June Carter, age 17, no fixed origin." "You were purchased by Mr. Merton under legal sale." "No," she replied. "I was stolen at 11. Sold to a man who called it debt repayment. Sold again. Ended up in Merton's hands 2 years ago." The courtroom hushed. "And what did he do?" June stared at the lawyer. "He beat us. Starved us. Locked us in cages if we talked back. Called it training. Said we'd be better off with men who could afford to keep us." Someone gasped. A woman in the back began to cry. Elias leaned forward, smiling still. She was wild, he said when the judge allowed him to speak. Uncivilized. We gave her food, shelter, clothes. We taught her how to survive. June turned toward him. You taught me how to fight. The silence that followed was deep enough to choke on. She went on, told them everything about the mines, the camps, the girls too young to lift a bucket, too scared to run. About the night the barn burned. About the names on the ledger. She spoke with a voice too steady for her age, too practiced for innocence. And when she was done, she sat back without looking at Elias again. Annabelle testified too. She told the room what she'd seen, what she'd learned, that June had saved her more than once, that everything she thought was charity had actually been debt, and June had paid for it in blood. When it was over, the judge adjourned for the night, and Elias smiled still, because he knew this wasn't about truth. It was about power, and power had never cared for truth. That evening, as the sky turned red over Olston, Silas sat with June on the cold stone steps behind the boarding house. They might not convict him, he said. They might call you a liar, or say the law was on his side. June nodded. I know. You still want to see it through. I didn't come for justice, she whispered. I came for war. But if I can't win with bullets, I'll use words. Inside, Annabelle sat writing by the window, her face pale but focused. She was copying names from the ledger. Every girl, every mark. She wouldn't forget a single one. That night, the sheriff was found beaten near the station. Elias's men had moved again, and the next morning, the judge didn't show. Poisoned. Panic rippled through the town. The trial was suspended. June watched from the boardwalk as Elias was loaded into a carriage, not for jail, but for safety. They were moving him for his protection. The federal agent avoided her eyes when she asked why. He has rights, the man muttered, until proven guilty. So he was being taken to Stone Point, a town 2 days south, for a delayed trial. Maybe, if the paperwork didn't vanish on the way. That night, June packed her things. Silas caught her by the door. Don't do it. But she just stared at him. You taught me not to wait. And with that, she was gone. Annabelle found the note the next morning, tucked beneath the pillow. I'm not letting him vanish. If law won't cage him, I will. Or worse, I'm done being prey. I'll be in Stone Point before they finish their coffee. I know the routes. Don't follow me unless you're ready to see me do something I won't regret. Signed, June Carter. The Stone Point stage rattled across dry earth under a heavy sky, the horses barely more than shadows behind plumes of dust. Inside the carriage, Elias Merton lounged like a man born to velvet, hands folded, smirk intact. 2 federal agents flanked him, rifles resting between their knees, but neither seemed particularly alert. Men like Elias didn't inspire fear the way outlaws did, at least not in the open. His power was quieter, and so were the threats he used to maintain it. He stared out the window, humming a song no one else recognized, his eyes reflecting miles of land he believed he already owned. But he wasn't watching the ridges. He didn't see the rider behind them, barely more than a speck at first, a girl low in her saddle, mouth tight, eyes hard. June hadn't slept. Not in 2 days. Her hair was caked with dust, her hands blistered from gripping the reins too long, but her focus never slipped. She knew Elias's routes by heart. She knew how fast the stages moved, when they'd stop, where the weak spots were. And she wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere back on the trail, a second rider had joined the chase. Silent, fast, determined. Annabelle. She'd found the note, saddled up her own horse, and left Olston before dawn. Silas had tried to stop her, then tried to follow, but she was faster, and she had a map June had sketched in the margin of an old almanac. She remembered what June had said. Don't follow me unless you're ready to see me do something I won't regret. Annabelle wasn't sure she was ready, but she wasn't letting June go alone. By the time the stage reached the Stone Point Bridge, a long, narrow crossing with cliffs on either side, June was already waiting. She stepped into the road just as the first will touch timber. Dust swirled around her. Behind her, the canyon dropped into blue haze. Ahead, the stage rocked to a halt. Elias leaned out of the window, saw her, smiled. Well, he said, Look who finally grew a spine. June didn't blink. Get out. The agents reached for their rifles. She raised hers first. I only need one shot, she said, and it won't miss. The horses skittered. The agents froze. One reached slowly for the door latch. Ma'am, I can't let you do this. You already did, she said, when you let him walk out of Olston with nothing but a coat and a wink. Elias stepped out slowly, brushing his sleeves. You really think this ends with you and a rifle, June? You'll swing for this. June kept the gun level. I'm not here to kill you, she said. Not yet. Elias's brows lifted. She nodded toward the saddlebag tied behind her horse. That's the ledger. The one with every name, every sale, every bribe. Copies went to Olston. One went to Federal, and one went to your rivals. He stiffened. June stepped forward. You won't buy your way out again. But I wanted to be here when the world started to choke you back. Behind her, hoofbeats thundered down the hill. Annabelle appeared, reins loose, hair tangled, coat flapping behind her like a banner. She dismounted hard and strode to June's side without hesitation. Elias looked between them. The princess, too. Wonderful. Annabelle didn't flinch. You sold people, Elias. You bought silence. You stole families. You ate from the same table, he spat. I did, and now I'm burning it down. The agents exchanged glances. One finally spoke. The judge in Stone Point was killed yesterday. Poison. We're taking Merton to the state capitol now. Then you'll take him in shackles, June said. And this time, neither man argued. By dusk, Elias was cuffed, loaded back into the carriage, and rerouted east. June and Annabelle stood at the ridge watching the wheels vanish. It wasn't a victory parade, but it was an ending, or so they thought. They returned to Stone Point to find Silas waiting outside the stable, covered in sweat and soot. Trouble back home, he said before they could speak. Big trouble. What kind? June asked. The kind you don't ride from. The kind you dig in for. He told them everything. How the ranch had been attacked again 2 nights after they left. Not by Elias's men this time, but by rival claimants emboldened by the power vacuum. A banker from Redbrush was threatening to seize half the land. The cattle were scattered. Half the staff had fled. The house barely held. Annabelle's face went pale. They waited till we left. Silas nodded. And now they're bleeding the place dry. June looked down at her hands, then at the dust-choked road winding back to the valley. We're going home, she said. They rode through the night, taking back trails and creeks, avoiding towns and bridges, pushing the horses hard. By morning, the land began to feel familiar again. Charred fences, broken gates, smoke lingering in the pines. The ranch was still there, but had changed. Windows shattered, doors off their hinges, a crooked sign swinging in the wind. They dismounted in silence, stepped through the broken gate. May met them on the porch, one arm in a sling, her face drawn tight. Didn't expect to see you, she said softly. You still standing? June asked. You still got fight? May nodded. Always. They walked through the house, every room showing new scars. Blood still stained the wood by the stairs. The back window was boarded up. The cellar had been emptied, looted, but the hearth still held coals, and someone had kept the fire going. In the barn, Nathan, the oldest ranch hand, was tending a limping mare. She's the last we got, he said without turning. Rest were driven off or taken. We're not done, June replied. That night, they gathered what was left. 7 hands, 2 children, 3 rifles. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Annabelle stood at the porch and addressed them all. Her voice didn't shake. This land isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's people who chose to stay. You don't have to fight. But if you do, fight like everything you are depends on it. Because it does. No one left. The next morning, the raiders came again. This time with wagons and torches, thinking they'd find an empty house and easy loot. Instead, they found June on the roof, Annabelle behind the porch columns, Silas in the barn rafters. The first man through the gate never touched the ground alive. By the time the 3rd wagon arrived, the ranch looked like a hornet's nest. Smoke, gunfire, shouts, but no retreat. Not this time. June moved through the chaos like she'd been born in it. She took down 3 men with 1 rifle before the barrel overheated. Then she switched to her knife, then to fists, then to rocks. It wasn't grace. It was desperation. But it worked. Annabelle fought too. She wasn't perfect. Her shots missed. Her hand shook. But she didn't stop. And when one of the raiders breached the parlor and raised a blade, it was Annabelle who pulled the trigger. The man dropped 2 feet from the kitchen. When the dust finally settled, the bodies lay scattered across the yard, the survivors bound or fleeing. And the ranch still stood, bloodied, burned, but breathing. They collapsed near the trough, laughing through tears. Silas sat in the dirt, hands shaking. June dropped her rifle and stared at the sky. Annabelle stood over her, then reached down a hand. "Come on," she said. "We're not done yet." June took it. They walked together to the house, past the damage, past the silence, into the only home either had ever chosen. That night, no one slept, but no one feared. Not anymore. The morning after the siege was slow and strangely still, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion too deep to speak through. Smoke drifted in thin lines from the last of the burned piles, and the earth was marked by boot prints, blood, and spent shells, stories written in the dirt. The ranch had survived, but just barely and not without cost. Nathan's leg had to be splinted. May's arm was infected. One of the younger hands, Tommy, only 16, hadn't made it through the night. June helped bury him herself, digging with blistered palms until her fingers bled through the bandages. No one offered to stop her. No one dared. The grave was shallow, just enough to hold the boy and what little was left of his coat. June said nothing as they lowered him in, just held her breath and let the weight of the silence settle. When the dirt was packed and the cross stood, she stepped back and met Annabelle's gaze. "We have to go," June said. Annabelle blinked, wind biting at her cheeks. "Go where?" "To Redbrush. That banker. He's the one who sent them. Merton's gone, but the rot's still here. We kill the weed, but leave the root. It just grows back." Annabelle didn't argue. Not this time. "Then we leave at first light." They packed light, just what they could carry and what wouldn't slow them. Silas caught them at the edge of the barn. "You're not going alone," he said, already saddled. June shook her head. "You're needed here." He narrowed his eyes. "So are you." Annabelle stepped forward. "We'll be back. If we're not, burn the ledgers. Hide the girls. Go east. Find someone who'll listen." He hesitated, then handed her a folded paper. "Take this." Map to a cabin 3 miles out from Redbrush. Old logging shack. No one knows it's there. Rest if you need to. They rode in silence, the land passing in slow waves. Burnt grass, black trees, hard sky. The road to Redbrush wasn't well traveled this time of year. No wagons, no trailers, just wind and old ghosts. By dusk, the cabin appeared just where Silas said it would. Small, almost invisible behind a line of cedar. They didn't light a fire. Just curled into blankets on the floor and waited out the night. Annabelle couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged, back to the wall, watching June as she cleaned her rifle. "I used to think people like you were made different," Annabelle said softly. "Harder, meaner. Now I think maybe you're just what happens when the world stops pretending it's fair." June didn't look up. "You're not wrong. I still don't know what to do with that. You survive. Then you figure it out." They left before dawn, reaching Redbrush by mid-morning. The town was nothing like Olston, bigger, richer, colder. No one nodded in greeting. No one asked questions. The buildings were brick and glass, all sharp corners and iron fences. The courthouse here was 3 stories high, guarded by men in clean uniforms with rifles polished to a shine. But June didn't go there. She went to the bank. Wellington and Sons, painted in gold letters so bright they seemed to mock every empty stomach in the county. She didn't knock, just walked through the doors like she belonged. Annabelle followed, a step behind. A man at the counter looked up, startled. "Miss, where's your manager?" June asked. He blinked. "Mr. Finch is in a meeting. He's not anymore." Before he could argue, she was already moving. Down the hall, past polished offices and velvet drapes, to the door marked private. She kicked it in. The man behind the desk was already standing, his mouth open in outrage. "What is the meaning of, 'You sent men to kill us'?" June said. "I thought I'd return the favor." He was older than she expected, round in the middle, with pink cheeks and soft fingers. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. "I don't know who you think you are, young lady. I'm the girl who burned your last investment to the ground. I'm the girl who watched your friends die so you could buy more land. And I'm the girl who brought the ledgers." She dropped the copies on his desk. His hands twitched. He didn't reach for them. "You think you're the first," he said coolly. "The first to rage at injustice? The first to dream of setting fire to the system? I've seen girls like you come and go. The ones who survive don't do it with noise. They do it by kneeling at the right time." Annabelle stepped forward. "And what about the ones who don't kneel?" He smiled faintly. "They're buried." June leaned closer. "Maybe, but not quiet." The door burst open behind them. 2 guards, rifles raised. June didn't flinch. "Try it. I've already mailed those ledgers to the state office. One scream out of me, and you'll be defending a lot more than property." The guards hesitated. The banker sat slowly. "You think you've won something?" "I don't need to win," June said. "I just need to make sure you lose." And with that, she turned and walked out. They didn't follow. Outside, the street felt brighter somehow. Looser, like something heavy had been peeled from the air. Annabelle let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Now what?" "Now we go back," June said. It was nearly nightfall by the time they returned to the ranch. The yard was quiet. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. But something was wrong. No dogs. No noise. June dismounted fast. Annabelle followed, heart hammering. Inside the house, the chairs were overturned. The hearth was cold. A trail of blood led down the hall. "May," June called. "Silas." Nothing. She ran for the barn. Empty. The paddock? Empty. Then she saw it. A figure slumped near the well. She sprinted over, heart in her throat. It was Nathan, barely breathing. He looked up, coughed once, and whispered. They came from the ridge, not Redbrush. Wrong move? Wasn't the banker. June dropped her knees. Who? Nathan's eyes rolled. Merton, but he was arrested, Annabelle said, stunned. Nathan tried to speak again, then went still. June stood, fists clenched. They moved him. The agents. He never made it to the capital. He bought them off, Annabelle whispered. He never left the state. June turned, scanning the horizon. Then she saw it. Far off, a thin line of dust, a column of smoke. And something else. A flag. A symbol from one of Merton's old mines. Annabelle stared. He's starting over. Somewhere new. No, June said. He's coming here. To finish it. They had hours. Maybe less. But that was all June needed. She didn't cry. Didn't panic. She just turned to Annabelle and said, Go find the others. The ones who left. The ones who ran. Tell them this is the last stand. If they ever want to be free, they fight now. And you? I dig in. Annabelle rode out without another word. And June, she stayed. She boarded windows, piled barrels, set traps, sharpened blades. The sun dropped like a guillotine. And in the distance, a horn blew. Elias Merton was coming. And this time, June was ready. The horn echoed through the valley like a funeral bell, low and cold and final. June stood in the center of the ranch yard. Her boots sunk into the churned mud where blood had dried and storms had passed. All around her, the wind picked up, swift, sharp, carrying the scent of pine, gun oil, and something else now. Fire. Smoke coiled far off to the west, signaling Elias Merton's return, not in chains as he should have been, but flanked by armed men, horses bred for speed, wagons heavy with supplies. He hadn't fled. He'd rebuilt, faster than anyone expected, and now he was coming to reclaim what he'd lost. Not just land or livestock, but power, control, silence. But this time, silence wasn't waiting for him. June crouched by the well, adjusting the iron lever Silas had built months ago. A crude water trap, meant to flood the lower slope if the fire spread too fast. It wasn't elegant, but it was all she had. Annabelle still hadn't returned. The riders she sent out hadn't come back. Maybe they were still gathering help. Maybe they were gone. June couldn't afford to believe in maybes. She moved through the house quietly, setting her final traps. Broken glass under the windows, powder laid across the doorframe to detect footsteps, rifles loaded and leaned at every possible vantage. Upstairs, she found the old locket Annabelle had left behind, still nestled in the drawer of the writing desk. Her mother's photo inside, blurred at the edges. She tucked it into her coat. By dusk, the ranch looked empty. Quiet, but it was the quiet of a drawn bowstring. They came at sundown. First the scouts, fast riders who crested the hill, saw no movement and signaled with raised fists. Then the Corps, 10, maybe 15 men, armed with long rifles, knives, dynamite strapped to saddlebags. In the center, riding high on a black stallion, was Elias Merton. His beard had grown thicker, his coat darker, his eyes harder. He rode like a king returning to a throne he had never earned. He signaled once, and they moved in. The first man through the gate hit the tripwire strung between two fence posts. It yanked him clean off his horse, smashing him against a rock with a wet, sick thud. The second got tangled in the rope beneath the trough. He screamed, but it was brief. Then the shooting started. June didn't aim for center mass. She aimed for knees, shoulders, hands, maiming, not killing. She wanted them slowed, confused, angry. That was where mistakes lived. They rushed the porch. The front steps exploded, barrel powder packed on the boards. Elias pulled his horse back, fury twisting his face. "It's just a girl," he shouted. "She can't hold us all." But doubt was already moving through the ranks. June reloaded, moved to the second floor. A rifle cracked beside her. She turned. Annabelle. Dusty, flushed, breathing hard. "I found them," she said. "They're coming. We just have to hold until—" The window shattered beside them. They ducked. Annabelle grabbed a second rifle and handed it over. "Let's make him bleed." For hours, the battle churned. June moved like a shadow, slipping from window to window, floor to floor. She trained for this, not by choice, but by survival. And she fought like someone with nothing left to lose. Annabelle stayed close, her aim improving with every shot, her hands no longer shaking. At some point, the front door gave way. Two men entered. June met them head-on in the parlor, knife in one hand, fireplace poker in the other. She dropped the first with a slash to the thigh. The second lunged. Annabelle shot him in the back before he reached the stairs. Breathing hard, they reset. "You still with me?" June asked. Annabelle nodded. "You?" June didn't answer. She didn't need to. Then, through the window, hooves. Dozens. Annabelle looked out. Riders. Dozens of them. Ranchers. Ex-hands. Even some of the women from Olston, armed with pitchforks and pistols, galloping over the ridge with Silas in the lead. Elias's men hesitated. It was all the opening June needed. She stepped onto the porch. Shot once into the air. Elias turned toward her. "This ends now," she shouted. He dismounted slowly, his face dark with fury. "You think you've won? You're just a girl playing soldier." She stepped forward. "I'm not playing," she said. "You trained me for this. Remember?" He drew his pistol. She was faster. One shot. It hit his shoulder. He staggered. The ranchers surrounded them, circling like wolves. Elias tried to stand straight. "You won't kill me," he spat. "You need someone to blame. Someone to fear." June lowered her rifle. "You're right," she said. Then she turned her back. Annabelle stepped forward. "You'll rot in a real jail this time." Elias laughed. Until Silas cracked the butt of his rifle across his jaw. The man crumpled. They bound him, loaded him into a wagon. And this time, they didn't leave it to marshals. They rode with him all the way to the state capitol, a procession of witnesses and voices and proof that the frontier had its own kind of justice. It took 3 weeks to get a hearing. But when it came, it was swift. Guilty on all counts. His sentence wasn't death. It was silence. A cell so deep and dark the sun forgot it. Back at the ranch, the rebuilding began. Slow, painful, but steady. The fence lines were restored. The herd repurchased. The rooms mended. Children laughed again in the halls. Fires burned at night, not for warning, but for warmth. June stayed. She worked the fields. taught the younger girls to shoot, to speak, to stand tall. Annabelle ran the books, wrote to the governor, opened the ranch's doors to orphans, runaways, wanderers who had nowhere else to go. They planted an orchard, cut a new well, built a schoolhouse with windows that caught the sun just right. One morning, June stood on the hill overlooking it all, boots in the dirt, wind in her hair. Annabelle joined her. "Do you think he ever thinks about this?" she asked softly. June shrugged. "Doesn't matter." Annabelle smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't." They stood in silence for a while, the sky wide above them. Then Annabelle reached over, took June's hand. Not as a gesture of rescue, but of choosing. "I used to think I'd live in the city," Annabelle said. "Big house, soft beds, music." "You still can," June replied. Annabelle looked down at the orchard, the schoolhouse, the laughter drifting up the hill. "I think I already do." And June, for the first time in her life, believed that maybe, just maybe, peace wasn't a story other people told. Maybe it was something you fought for, built with your hands, and guarded with your soul. Because the West didn't hand out mercy. You carved it, one breath at a time.